Hey everybody, and welcome back to another sequence of late night wandering with Die Potato. It's been another night, and hopefully on the screen about here will be game footage that I'm now a little off from watching, so that's fun. This is footage that I recorded when I first started to do late night wandering, but I am when I was trying to record it, OBS didn't pick up my mic, so I ended up recording about how much was it? 50 minutes of footage without realizing I didn't have my mic going. So that was pretty fun. So I decided this would be a perfect opportunity for me to one, try dubbing over footage to see how that'll sound. Two, to see if I can actually talk over 50 minutes of gameplay footage. Or actually talk about things for 50 minutes without having a game in the background that I'm playing. Because my mind tends to wander a bit whenever there's a game going. So, yeah. I'm up recording again because I can't sleep. I debated actually playing something or doing something, but I really don't feel like it, and I wanted to try out this dubbing thing. Game on the screen at the moment is a Metroidvania that's pretty solid, called Momodora: Reverie Under the Moonlight. Very Castlevania-esque, just in the title. Not really in the aesthetic, as far as you can tell now anyways, but you'll see a bit later it gets a bit more like it when we get into the city. For real. Combat feels very nice. I do like this game, even though I haven't finished it. It's on my long list of games to finish. God. Anyways, how are you guys? I'm just, chilling, hoping to go hang out with some friends, some friend dogs, the usual. Don't know what we'll do. Hopefully something pretty decent. In the meantime, I need to work on some things. I started reading again some Warhammer 40k novels, which are interesting. I'm personally not a gigantic Warhammer 40k fan. I don't know about you guys. I always found it's the main thrust of Warhammer 40k is in the tabletop war game, and I'm too poor to even think about investing in said war game, and two, I'm just not that into it. I don't know. I'm not into painting models, which is a good percentage of what playing Warhammer 40k is. It's like painting your models to look cool as fuck. I would be a terror. I could probably do it, but it's just one of those things, I'm pretty sure everyone at some point or another comes across a hobby or some kind of thing that they could see themselves doing if they bothered to put in the time for it. But it's you have to put in the time for it. It's a massive pain in the ass. Why would I do that when I have other hobbies I'm actually already invested in at this point that I can further invest my time in and therefore I'm already further along in the progression of these hobbies. I might as well finish them. I think I got confused here and I thought that was a puzzle, but it's not really. But yeah, I'm reading Warhammer books again. If anything, I find the setting of Warhammer pretty interesting, because I'm an edgy fuck, as none of you would know, actually. I haven't produced enough fucking videos to give anybody any idea of what I enjoy in literature, or in a narrative sense. So, it's am I poisoned? Huh, I guess I was poisoned. But Warhammer, if you do not know, is extremely grimdark, extremely edgy. I'm not even super interested in it for those reasons. I'm interested in it because it has a lot of narrative, elements of narrative that I... Holy shit, that thing does a lot of damage. Am I playing on hard mode? Is that why things do so much damage? I think I was playing on hard mode, and the hard mode in this is, like, unnecessarily difficult. It's just stat inflation, which is like, the worst kind of hard mode. I'll go off on that later. Also, if only I had, like, a fucking pen that I could jot this shit down on. Anyways, yeah, I personally appreciate Warhammer lore, however much you can appreciate Warhammer lore, mainly for its interesting reflection on how the perception of the universe really works. Because a lot of elements of Warhammer are on one hand very, like, firm. Like, you know, you got the Emperor, who's basically like God, and all of humanity needs to believe in him. But there's also a lot of it, from what I've read, of course. I have not read much of Warhammer lore. I've read some wikis. I've read the 1D4chan boards, which are very memey. I've been on TG every once in a while. That cesspool, even though it's not that much of a cesspool. For you Warhammer fucking fans out there, I've read the Eisenhorn Omnibus. I liked a lot of it. I didn't really like the end of the Eisenhorn Omnibus. I'm not sure what the last book is called, because I read the fucking Omnibus. But I did enjoy a majority of it. I feel like if anybody else would like to get into Warhammer lore, the Eisenhorn Omnibus is a really good place to start. But I've recently been reading the Caiaphas Cain short novels or novellas. They really do not fucking feel like novellas, man. They're normally between like 100 to like 150 pages in length, but they were very clearly like printed for maximum like space. Like, it's very obvious like the publishers did not want to like. It's very obvious that the Caiaphas Cain books did not do well enough to warrant like an actual like normal book release, so they were subjected to being like small novels. But the content of them is like, there's enough content in them to like fully flesh out like a 300 to 400 page book, like double spaced with like 12-point font. So instead, to like save space, they made it 8-point font and made it single spaced. So even though I'm reading this like 101 page book, it's taking me like the entire afternoon to do it because of how fucking small the print is and how tightly packed it is on a page. And I'm reading this on a PDF too, so it feels even fucking smaller on my screen. My fucking 1080 laptop screen. But, yeah, I do enjoy some of the narrative elements. I think, some of the races are kind of cool. It's also kind of grimdark and edgy, which I like, but I mainly like how, I find it interesting whenever, narratives go into the perception of the universe and how people see the world and the world around them can, how people's perception of the world around them can change things as much as anything else, which is a very big factor in Warhammer, where faith is a very large thing. Because I guess what I'm talking about is kind of like a sort of faith. More or less a faith, and I guess more a, I don't know. I don't like the word faith. Faith is a very strange word to me. I've never been a huge fan of it. Oh, come on. Come on, me in the past. This isn't that hard of a situation to get out of. Jesus. Oh, however, will I get out of... Oh. I thought I just had to roll through, but that's not how that works. Oh, this is an NPC that I still have no idea how the fuck to interact with her. Fucking goblins. It's fucking 2 a.m. I'm gonna keep getting sidetracked like this. Oh boy. Anyways. What was I saying? Fuck. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, faith. I don't like faith as a word. Faith, I feel, is a very charged word at this point. Mainly, of course, for its religious connotations, but I feel like you can have, I feel like you can use it in other ways, but it's kind of been bastardized to be mainly in the religious kind of, connotation. Which I'm not a fan of. I don't like when words just get connotations strapped to them by merit of being used in that way for so long. But yeah, faith. Faith is a very large part, or just believing in what will happen or how the world works is a very big part of Warhammer lore. There's a fucking entire, like, race, basically. Basically all the races in Warhammer are kind of dedicated to that, but there's a race called the Orcs. Spelled with a K, not a C, because they gotta be cool. They're like normal orcs, essentially, if you know, like, I don't know, WoW or anything. Most fantasy settings, they're like normal orcs. They're big green brute fucks that kind of just kill everything. But these ones are particularly special. I do like how Warhammer kind of just, like, goes out of its way to just kind of, like, say fuck you to normal fantasy setting tropes, or to just, like, do it in such a way that it's, like, kind of tongue-in-cheek. But not that tongue-in-cheek. Like, Warhammer, to a certain degree, is aware. Like, I'm not going to say to a certain degree. I will say that sometimes that... Oh, yeah, that was a thing I didn't know about. I didn't know you could, like, knock the, like, shield goblins' knives out of the air with melee attacks. I had no idea you could do that. Also, I'm almost dead, but that's fine. Sometimes Warhammer lore, depending on when it's written, Warhammer is like a fucking long fuck-off universe and canon that's been added to for the past, like, 40 years. Sometimes Warhammer lore is actually self-aware, and then sometimes it's just not. It's mainly by merit of the fact that, like, it's been, like, worked on by, like, for 40 years by different people. So the quality of it can vary wildly. Like, sometimes you get the Eisenhorn Omnibus, which is a very interesting series. And then you get stuff like, apparently, some of the Horus Heresy books, which are of very varying quality. Some of them are apparently pretty bad, even though the Horus Heresy books are kind of good to read if you care at all about that lore. I'm finding a big centipede bitch. Arthropod Demonidia. I thought that was spelled demon as in the way that, like, the Warhammer people spell it. They spell it with an A-E, not just an E. Anyways, yeah, I find Warhammer pretty interesting, even though I'll probably never get into it. I do like reading the books. The Cyphus Cain books, I've been enjoying a lot. I like Cyphus Cain. He's like this, he's a decently interesting character. I will say that the books get a little monotonous, because Cyphus Cain himself, like, it's fun just watching the antics of Cyphus Cain and his compatriots. And the last book that I currently have, which is the 6th book, I'm not sure if it's the actual last book, and it seems to imply otherwise. But the last book kind of twists on his head a bit with him being kind of like a mentor to other commissars. He's a commissar, by the way. And in the Warhammer universe, there's like the military of humanity. I should give a little bit more context. Essentially, humanity has spanned the globe, or spanned the universe, more or less, and they're basically just like, they're normally how normally humans work in, like, settings like this. They're kind of just, like, fucking everywhere, and they kind of just do their own thing and kind of fucking trample over everybody. This is another example of, sorry, I have to get my blanket because it's kind of cold. And I'm sitting in my office chair. My shitty office chair. This is one of the few examples where I feel like, Warhammer is, like, kind of tongue-in-cheek with its, like, setting, because in Warhammer, the, like, premise of the setting is that, humanity has, like, expanded and progressed to such a point that it's basically impossible for them to, like, it's basically impossible for them to, like, support the, like, massive amount of people and the structure that now exists as a result. So because of that, there are just, like, entire swaths of the universe of, like, humans who are, like, in, like, these, like, medieval era, like, city, like, planets. Or sometimes they're, like, normal. They're, like, as modern as it can get in Warhammer. It just varies so wildly. So it makes for a pretty interesting setting. And humanity itself is just, like, this bunch of, like, emperor-fearing fucks who basically think they're better than everybody else no matter what. Granted, the rest of, like, humanity, or the rest of the sentient beings in Warhammer also think they're better than everybody else, more or less. But humanity has a very strong stance toward that. They call all other races the lesser races. Even the ones that were there before them, they consider them lesser races, and any involvement with them gets you shot in the face. It's pretty funny. Fuck, I'm gonna keep forgetting my, like, tangent. Anyways, Caiaphas Cain himself is a commissar in the Imperial Guard, who is, like, the, like, main, military body. They're kind of like the army, but they're, like, the entire military. And essentially he's a commissar, and a commissar in Warhammer lore is supposed to be, attached to Imperial Guard regiments so that they can improve for morale reasons and also for oversight in order to make sure they don't, like, rebel or anything. So he himself is supposed to be, like, he's supposed to be, like, a strong and stiff leader that, like, the Imperial Guardsmen can, like, look to for, like, support and to make sure that, like, mutinies don't break out and to keep up morale. But in reality, he's, like, this... I say in reality, but it's like a very common theme throughout the books that, like, commissar, like, he thinks of himself in this. Oh, what's happening here? I don't know. It's a very also, you can see how Castlevania everything has got. You can see the blood moon in the back, and you can see the city motifs, rundown, Gothic city, you know, that kind of thing. The artwork is still a little, I guess, too cheery, I guess you can say. It feels a lot more dour with the lighting on her clothes and on herself, but it still feels still a little too bright in my opinion. She stands out a little hard. That's mainly because of her outfit, which is fair. But fuck. God, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm sorry. I hate it when I do this. Anyways, oh yeah, it's an extremely common theme throughout the Warhammer books of how it's basically, like, always meant, essentially, not the Warhammer books, essentially in the Commissar, or in the Caiaphas Cain books, they're like a retelling, they're like memoirs almost, they're like a retelling of all of his past exploits, like, compiled by a friend of his. And he always talks about, in the books, how he's always out, he says that, like, all of his actions are out of, like, pragmatism, so that he can, like, just live another day. Like, he'll always talk about, like, oh, if I had the choice between, like, going to fight on the front lines or, you know, hiding out so I don't fucking get torn to shreds by orcs, I'll hide behind the fucking guards anyways. But even despite of that, he always just gets himself into situations because of his, like, his reputation, because his reputation is of being, like, a hero of the Imperium, and of being, like, this almighty, this, like, legendary hero who saved multiple worlds from ruin, but from various sources, that whenever people will just constantly be like, ah, yes, Commissar Cain, you would like to accompany us onto the front lines, right? And he'll be like, well, shit, if I refuse this, they'll think I'm not actually a legendary hero. And he'll always talk about this like it's this big burden on himself, but he always finds himself in these situations anyways. So it makes you kind of, like, think for a moment that, like, even though he, like, admits very heavily to the fact that he's, it's like a very strange, like, triple, like, reverse, like, modesty. Because on one hand, he'll always talk about how he likes to play the modest hero because that's what everybody eats the fuck up. Like, whenever people are confronted with, like, this legendary hero of the Imperium, he always likes to play the modest. He always tries to be modest because people tend to eat that up more than him, like, gallivanting around as, like, this larger-than-life character. But in reality, he actually is kind of a modest guy. He doesn't really, like like even in his memoirs, he always says that like it's all out of a sense of pragmatism and like self-service, but he always found himself in those situations anyways. And even when he would have the choice to save his own skin or to save other people, he would save others anyways. I don't know what I was doing there. So, that's why I like Kane. Kane's pretty interesting in that respect, and I like him. His exploits are pretty funny. He's very clever, I guess, is a big part of it. Being a commissar for as long as he has, I guess, lends himself to being very clever and charismatic. And in the last book, I'm just gonna assume it's the 6th book, he's currently, like I said, teaching some new commissars the ropes, which is pretty interesting. It's interesting to see like him in like the height of his knowledge and trying to pass it down to other commissars, because being a commissar is not an easy job in the Imperium, supposedly. Some commissars tend to push it a little too far, because it's kind of like a meme in the Warhammer universe that like commissars just kind of, in order to boost morale and to make sure that nobody fucks with them, they'll like fucking just execute Imperial Guardsmen whatever they want, which is kind of a thing. Sometimes they do that, and it's pretty funny. But he's like, no, guys, you cannot. Like at one point, or it just happened in the book. Like a perfect scenario came up where like he got to send his like young cadets to like go like watch over some squads of like PDF soldiers. So they're not like actually Imperial Guardsmen. Essentially, they're the Imperial Guardsmen who are like the main armies, and then they're the PDF, which is like the Planetary Defense Forces. And they like defend planets. They're like militias, basically. They're like militias. So they get to watch over these militias. And one of them asks, Commissar Kane, do we have full commissarial authority while we're with these squads? And he was like, to a degree, please do not go executing anybody as much as you want without checking with me first. And he's like, aw, man. I was like, that's pretty good. I do find Kane interesting. The Eisenhorn trilogy, whichever one you want to call it. As you can see, I kind of figured out the trick with this boss pretty easily. As long as you just do not get close to him at all, he kind of just is pretty easy to beat. And as you can see, I did more damage with the bow than I'm doing just beating the shit out of him with melee. Oh. Rip. Ooh, Big Titty Witch. Oh boy. Eisenhorn Omnibus was a very different sort of book. Instead of following from an Imperial Guard's kind of standpoint, because the Imperial Guard is very much, they're very I won't say one note, but like the threats they deal with are pretty average, I guess you can say. They typically only deal with stuff that like that an army can generally like destroy, like large standing forces. It's basically just like an army versus an army sort of thing. But Commissar Kane, it tends to like get a bit more specific, because Kane will try to handle things mano-a-mano with like various forces that like come up against them, like the Force of Chaos, or specific individuals, because that's kind of just how the plot has to work out. Eisenhorn Omnibus, instead of following a commissar in like the general military, you follow Gregory Eisenhorn, who is an inquisitor for the Holy Inquisition. Basically, the Inquisition is is kind of like the clandestine spec ops part of the Warhammer universe. Essentially, they're calling them like a spy ring, or like something very similar to that would be very apt. They're either like spec op. They're like somewhere between like spies and like full ranking military officers, but even higher than that. Essentially, Inquisitors are charged with destroying anything that can threaten the Imperium from within. And as a result, they're divided into 3 chapters, or 3 orders. Yeah, 3 orders. They're called orders. There's the Ordo Xenos, which is like charged with like destroying any alien threats. The Ordo Hereticus, which is charged with destroying threats from within, heretics and things like that. And then the Ordo Malleus, which I believe is the one tasked with destroying what is it? Threats from chaos itself, I'm pretty sure. I get a little shaky with the Ordo Malleus because those came up the least so far in my readings. So you follow an Inquisitor, and essentially Inquisitors are like they're like how I'm describing. They're basically like professional spies to a certain extent, but they have like full authority to do whatever the fuck they want, whenever they want. Basically, if you have an Inquisitor can do whatever the fuck they want, and they have a massive amount of resources allocated to them to keep the Imperium safe. So it lends itself to a much more widespread narrative than the Caiaphas Cain books can. And in particular for the Eisenhorn Omnibus, it's a more interesting perspective into how far one should go before how far one should be willing to go before they basically lose themselves completely. Basically, how much of a monster you're willing to become to combat other monsters is the entire tilt of the Eisenhorn Omnibus. Which is pretty interesting. I enjoyed it, even though the 3rd book kind of fell flat, but I appreciated it a ton. It's also a very good starting point for people new to the Warhammer universe. It's written in such a way that, like, it basically assumes you have no idea what the fuck the Warhammer universe is about, and it lends itself to being easy to digest. If you don't know anything about it, I'd wholly recommend it. It's a very interesting read. And I have some other ones that I want to go into. I have a fuckload of Space Marine books that I could go into. God, I also have all the Horus Heresy books, which I'm kind of avoiding reading. I really need to read more. I have a lot that I need to read. How far am I into this? 27 minutes? Yeah, thereabouts. The space remaining for recording, 147 hours, 22 minutes. That'll be fine. I do need more to read, though. I'm also a big fan of the Dresden Files, if anybody knows the Dresden Files. I'm kind of going on a tangent about things I like, because I realized not too long ago that I really only talked about things I fucking despised over the last 2 of these. The first being Bioshock Infinite, and the second being, it wasn't first JoJo, but it was first the Hearts of Stone DLC for The Witcher 3, and then the fucking what I didn't like about the Little Witch Academia. What I didn't like about Little Witch Academia, that show. So I enjoy talking about this. Anyways, the Dresden Files are another. Why the fuck am I just standing there? The Dresden Files are another interesting book series that I wholly enjoy. The Dresden Files are my fucking jam. I love the Dresden Files is basically everything I was fucking I'm looking for in a fantasy setting. Urban fantasy setting, more specifically. I don't think I ever figured out what the fuck that was up with that. I might have. I can't remember. I've already played most of this game through, but it's been a while, and I also didn't play it on hard mode. Hard mode's a fucking bitch. As you can see, I just almost got one shot, but like, that thing basically would have half helped me on Oof. I should have brought more water. Dresden Files are basically everything I'm looking for. They're very interesting. The main thing about the Dresden Files is that I find it meets this very fascinating middle ground that I think a lot of fantasy, like, I don't know what to call it, because it is urban fantasy, but I guess it's like, inclusive fantasy, I guess, is what you could kind of call it. It kind of like, it kind of basically like tries to include basically every possible fantasy like setting or like anything fantastical at all, like from any culture, every culture possible, it'll include it. And they do, it has, as a result, it has a very flexible universe to do so, but I think the Dresdenverse is like one of the best that's ever done it. It does it very, very well. To make you, and it's very hard to do, to try to like include everything like that. And to make it all work in a way that it would jive with everything else. And it's really interesting to see how Jim Butcher kind of goes about it, because it's not an easy task. Especially with how many books he's written for. He's written like fucking like 12, I think. More than 12, 15 books. It's in that ballpark. He's written a lot of books for it. He's written a lot. I'm waiting for the next book to come out, which will hopefully be this year. I can pray. But Dresden Files is a very interesting series looking into kind of... I feel like the Dresden Files do a few things very, very well, and some other things not as well, but I can kind of excuse it because it's very interesting. What the fuck am I doing? I'm probably like tangenting about something. God. The Dresden books do a few things that I think are very interesting. One, it's giving a sense of the... God. One, it's making it feel like making it feel like the protagonist's choices actually matter throughout the books, and that the situations and decisions he makes in certain situations will come back to bite him in the future. Jim Butcher's very good at doing that with Harry, because Harry's a very well, I should probably talk about Harry. Harry Dresden's basically a wizard. That's the tilt of it, basically. He's a wizard. He is a wizard, he does all sorts of wizarding things, but he's also a private investigator. He kind of is, he's a very rough and tumble kind of guy. He's pretty emotional, he's pretty, angry, and he has his own demons, but he tries to make a living and tries to help people as a result. He has a dogma that he follows, but Harry's got his own problems as much as anybody else. He's very much a human being, I feel. Essentially, the first book, which is Stormfront, starts out with you kind of just being introduced to Harry. He works as a private investigator, sometimes for the Chicago PD. He lives in Chicago. That's very important. Basically, all of the books take place in Chicago, which is a massive part of the setting. Oh, you only have to hit those twice? I forgot that. He works as a private investigator. He also is a wizard, but being a wizard has as many perks as you might anticipate, has as many problems as perks as you might anticipate. Particularly, there's a set of laws that wizards are never supposed to break, because otherwise they typically go fucking nuts. Or they become they either become like power-hungry lunatics, or they just go fucking insane. And one of those laws is that you're not allowed to kill another human being with magic. It's just a line you can't cross. And while you may think that's a very arbitrary sort of line to cross, it's a very interesting one, because Harry himself did indeed kill somebody else with magic. And normally, whenever that happens, he would just be executed as instantly. The White Council, or I think it's called the Council of White, or something like that. The Council of Wizards takes these laws extremely seriously, and whenever a wizard, no matter, basically there's no exceptions to the rule, typically. There's very limited exceptions. 90%, 99% of the time you get beheaded and you're dead. Harry was a very special case, I guess you can say. He killed another in self-defense. It was like a mentor who wanted to drag him in towards kind of the dark side. And so it was in self-defense. It wasn't just out of cold blood. It was in a cold-blooded murder. And also, he was sponsored by another who offered to take him under his wing and teach him about how... try to teach him about how to not use magic in such a way. And a lot of these, you can really feel like the repercussions of this throughout the entirety of the books. A lot of some characters just don't trust Harry for the longest of times because of what he did, and they'll keep not trusting him because of other decisions he makes. Jim Butcher does a really good job with really making you feel the decisions that Harry makes throughout the books, good and bad. Harry's made bad decisions as well as good decisions. It's really what makes him feel human. And I feel like that's probably one of the best parts about Jim Butcher's writing. Another really good part that I enjoy is the inclusive fantasy setting. You basically include fucking everything in the kitchen sink, which is pretty cool. I appreciate it a lot. Is there anything else I really appreciate about it? I appreciate there's a fucking tabletop RPG for it. It's super cool. You should check it out. And the books, too. I'd wholly recommend them. As for things I don't really like, I feel like this is kind of nitpicky, but, like, I don't know. Like, on one hand, Jim Butcher... Well, okay. I'll start with this. A lot of characters in the Dresden universe seem to just be infinitely snarky for no adequate reason. It's the world of snark trope. You can go fucking TV tropes that shit if you want. But it's like everybody and like their mother has the like best sense of wit possible for every possible situation. It's understandable that Harry has it, but like it's like literally everybody. On one hand, I can kind of excuse it because it's supposed to be like modern, and nowadays, like being snarky and having wit is kind of just like a thing. If you're not snarky and witty nowadays, like, where the fuck have you been? But I feel like it's turned up to 11, especially when you get into, like, some of, like, the fantasy characters, like, are also that fucking witty and snarky. Granted, some of them are, like, many centuries old, so they've had some time to, sharpen that, but I don't know. I feel like it's kind of strange when everybody can fucking snap jokes at one another as fucking sharply as they can. Another thing is it feels like, I don't know. I don't want to call Jim Butcher a misogynist. And I feel like, to a certain extent, he's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. What am I doing? I don't want to call Jim Butcher a misogynist, and to a certain extent, I feel like this might be because the books are just written from Harry's point of view. And Harry is basically like an admittent, like, misogynist, or not misogynist, but like a chauvinist, I guess. Like, he very much, like, is... Like, he'll fall for a... This is kind of like a character flaw of his. It's very much viewed as a character flaw by everybody else around him. He tends to, His reasoning tends to get kind of weak when it comes to, like, women. And he doesn't like pushing women around too much. Or, like... it's kind of like a typical kind of, like... dude attitude from like the 90s or something. Like he doesn't like hitting girls and shit like that. He's not like a fucking like alpha dude bro guy or anything, but he does have a different attitude towards women sometimes. But it feels like Jim Butcher just applies that to all the women he writes in the book. Like, really, in the books, like, really, it's kind of weird, because, like, all of the women that are kind of worth mentioning are generally, like, super attractive, and, like, kind of, I don't know. He kind of addresses this, funnily enough, in his last book, Which I found kind of funny that he bothered to address this. Because on one hand, I feel like he should have addressed this a lot earlier. But on the other, I don't know. I just feel like he should have addressed this a lot earlier. Essentially, he kind of, like, addresses the concern. Or he kind of, like, addresses the fact that, like, a lot of the characters in the Dresden universe are, like, a lot of the women, in particular, are, like, super attractive. By way of, like, talking to, like, another woman, of having Harry, like, talk to, like, this woman who was, like, a sorceress, who herself was, I'm pretty sure, pretty attractive. And she, like, asked him, like, oh, why wouldn't, she was basically wondering why a friend of hers, or kind of like a mentor to a certain extent, wasn't, like, interested in her. And Harry's like, look, lady, like, I hope you realize that, like, normally, like, really bad things in our line of work in this kind of, like, fantasy setting are, like, super, like, hot. So he might feel kind of threatened by that. And I had to, like, kind of, like, sit back and think about it. And I was like, I guess that makes sense that, like, a lot of the, like, supernatural creatures kind of have this kind of supernatural beauty to them, or just super fucking hot. Because why wouldn't they be? It's a good, easy way to gain trust. It's like being super attractive is an easy way to do that, I guess. And she was kind of like, oh, wow, I'm too attractive. And I was like, yeah, I guess you kind of are. I don't know. It just felt kind of weird. And and thinking about it, I guess I can kind of accept that, but I don't know. I feel like it shouldn't have taken this long to kind of address that. Then again, thinking about it, like, the most attractive characters in the books are generally supernatural creatures that could probably kill Harry without a second thought. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking about it too much. Those are basically most of my problems with the Dresden books, though. I do find the rest of the setting extremely interesting. And I like it a bunch. God, I wish I had more water. You know what? Since I'm fully capable of pausing the recording now, I'm gonna go get some more water. I will first, actually, no, I'll just pause the recording first. You guys won't even notice a thing. And we're back. Alrighty. See? I basically was gone for no time at all. Yeah. I do enjoy the Dresden Files books a lot. If you want to know how to do a fantasy setting, very wide spanning, try to include urban fantasy especially, fucking read the Dresden Files. They are basically a primer into how to do it well. Hell, write Dresden Files fanfiction. You could do basically anything with the Dresden verse. Anything at all. Oh, God. Are there any other really good books I could recommend? Don't think so. None are coming to mind at the moment. What did come to mind when I was actually... I'll talk about difficulty settings later. I know I talked about that a little bit earlier when I was talking about this game here, Momodora, but I think I want to dedicate a little more time to that. And I enjoyed this tangent I'm going on about media that I actually enjoy. I thought about Valhalla when I was getting something to drink. It's nice water. By Valhalla, I mean Valhalla Cyberpunk Bartender Action, the, I guess, game that's on Steam. It's more of a visual novel, honestly, that has some basic, some basic gameplay mechanics in the form of making drinks. But I find that I really enjoyed that. But I enjoyed that game / visual novel a lot. But I think the thing that like most stuck out to me was I have this nasty habit of reading Steam Curator reviews and getting super tilted at the Steam Curator reviews that I don't agree with. I guess as anybody does, but it bothered me more than anything, especially when I remember I read one, I can't remember by who, they were talking about how Valhalla was kind of just like a bland story filled with like anime tropes and cliches that were kind of like, if you like that sort of thing, hooray for you, but like, it's not that good. And I was like, is it? I was like, I don't know. They really make it sound... I always find it funny whenever people just view games like that, or just any media like that. Any media that wears its, like, influences on its sleeve as heavily as Valhalla does, without a slight, like, sense that it might be done in, I don't know, jest, or, like, with tongue-in-cheek, or, like, self-awareness. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like people, when they have their assumptions about a, like, particular form of media, can, like, just think that it's all the same. I shouldn't be saying this like it's some, like, fucking, highbrow form of fucking logic here. This isn't fucking new. People have done this since the beginning of time, making assumptions about things they don't get fully, but I just find it even funnier in this day and age, especially with, I don't know, with the internet. I sound like I'm fucking 37, but, like, I don't know. It's strange to me that people can still have these strange assumptions even though they can literally look up anything they want. Like, I don't know. Do you guys have any assumption? Do you guys have any, like, thing that people are into that you've never really gotten? I don't really want to call out anything in specific, and because I don't know. On one hand, if I call out something too specific, I feel like I'd be homing in too much on one thing, and I feel like I'd be kind of missing the point. Like, I don't know. Like, this happens a lot mainly with anime. People get this idea that anime is... I don't know. People get this idea that anime is, like, this very niche sort of media that, like, either weeaboos are into, or, I don't know, either weeaboo fucks are into, or people who just like watching cartoons, even though that's not, like, that's kind of missing the point here. Like, come on, guys. This is part of just, like, the weird, like, stigma that evolved around cartoons. This weird differentiation between Japan and the United States that happened at some point, where like cartoons are kind of just like a thing for children to watch in the United States' eyes, while in Japan it's kind of like they make anime for fucking everybody. They're fucking workplace comedy animes. Do you think a 12-year-old? Do you think a 10-year-old wants to watch a fucking workplace comedy anime? Are you being fucking serious? God. You think a 10-year-old wants to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood or Berserk? Well, I guess maybe not watch Berserk, maybe read Berserk, but, like, it's really interesting to me, this, like, strange stigma that people have. Like, sometimes I see these threads all the time on Reddit. I won't say all the time. I see them moderately often. These, like, weird, we're almost fucking out of the video. I might continue this into something else, actually, but... Anyways, I see these fucking hilarious threads on Reddit, specifically on Ask Reddit, where people are like, people with anime profile pictures. Why? Why do you have anime profile pictures? And people in response are just like, I like anime, and what else would I have? Like, This is baffling to me. Like, whenever people question why people have an anime profile picture of anything, like, I don't know. Like, on one hand, I can kind of accept it being weird if it's just, like, a cute anime girl. Which, I have cute anime girl profile pictures, fuck you. It's like, whatever. It's like, people ask that, and it's like, because I like anime, and I pick profile pictures based on things I like. What else am I putting that there for? What else do you make a profile picture of yourself for? Do you use it? Who the fuck uses a profile picture? Okay, one. This is making it sound like having a profile picture of yourself is like kind of a common thing. Who the fuck makes a profile picture of themselves on like on internet accounts, on Reddit, on like, I don't know, Discord, on Skype? Who does that? What else is it gonna be? Like, I don't know. If I put a picture of myself, of like my favorite video game character, that's not weird, is it? No, that's not weird. If I put a picture of myself of like my favorite like actor from a show, or like a clip from a show, like a normal like American Western TV show, is that weird? No, it's not. Anyways, I'll go on a bit more of a tangent about this in a bit.